servant leader. That sounds a bit like a contradiction in terms, but it's a profoundly important idea. Indeed, I'd argue that servant leadership is the single most valuable approach to leadership. And it's certainly an approach that no leader can afford to ignore. So in this video, I'm going to answer the question, what is servant leadership? Servant leadership is a model of leadership based on a simple ethical principle that leaders must first serve the people who follow them. As a leader, you have a moral responsibility to help people to grow and to thrive. But a servant leader must also serve the organisation to whom they belong. They must help it grow and thrive too. They must leave it at least as healthy and as vital as when they took their leadership role. For me, this is about becoming a steward for the organisation and its assets and for the people within the organisation. And that means, as a leader, you have a duty of care to your people, to your organisation, to its reputation and its assets. That's what servant leadership is all about. I also like the way that the former CEO of Herman Miller, Max De Pree, expressed it. He said that the leader is the servant of his followers, in that he removes the obstacles that prevent them from doing their jobs. He goes on to say, in short, the true leader enables his or her followers to realise their full potential. The origin of the term servant leadership and many of the ideas we now associate with it come from Robert Greenleaf, who was for about 40 years an executive of what is now AT&T. And it was during his career that he read a book by Hermann Hesse called The Journey into the East and encountered a character that embodied the way he came to think of servant leadership. Greenleaf wrote extensively on the subject of servant leadership, and I'll put links to his books in the description below. Somewhat later, when Max De Pree stepped down from his role as CEO of Herman Miller in the late 1980s, he too picked up the ideas of servant leadership and wrote about them. In his book, Leadership is Art, which I'll also link to in the description, he set out his approach to leadership, which is very much a vision of a leader as a servant. Perhaps the easiest way to understand servant leadership is to see how leadership needs to evolve as you lead a team from its formation through to its maturity. And I'm going to break it down into 4 simple stages. Stage 1 is a new team, and it needs a new leader who is able to create a safe space for that team to start to become productive and to start to get to know one another. In stage 2, the team is dealing with conflict and challenge, so it needs an assertive leader, one who can keep them focused on the work they need to do, but also step in and resolve conflict and deal with the behaviours of the team as they struggle to understand their roles. Stage 3 is about creating processes and practices. And it needs a pragmatic leader who can help the team to find ways of working together. An important part of your role as a leader in this stage of the team development is introducing team members to one another and making sure they can build strong working relationships whilst finding appropriate working practices and starting to optimize them. And as the team starts to perform at a high level, to develop those optimized working practices and to have those strong working relationships, then the team will become self-confident and self-reliant. And the 4th stage is about serving that self-confident, self-reliant team And for this stage, it needs a servant leader. A leader who is able to provide the team with what it needs and also to shelter it from the distractions that will get in the way of doing what it is there to do. Consequently, I think of a servant leader as having two roles. The roles relating to Rations and Raincoat. Rations first. It's the role of the servant leader to provide the team with the resources they need to do their job properly. They need equipment, they need knowledge, they need information, they need assets and materials. And it's the role of the servant leader to provide them so the team can get on with its job. But in any organisation, there is a constant rain of distraction. Constantly the organisation is interfering with teams and their jobs. So it is the role of a servant leader to protect the team from that, to act as a raincoat to shelter them from all those distractions. Consequently, as a servant leader, you will often find yourself dealing with the mundane admin as a way of protecting your team from that and therefore giving them the time and space to do their job. In organisations, the term servant leader is well named because you will feel sometimes like you are at a lower level than your team because you're dealing with all of the nitty-gritty, day-to-day annoying distractions. But you know what? As a leader, your primary job is to make sure your team can work well and achieve its goals. And if that means you doing the admin, that's fine. And I'd like to end by listing some of the most important attributes that you will need to develop in yourself to become an effective servant leader. And I think there are 10 principal attributes of a good servant leader. And the first is integrity, absolute and fixed. You will not always be able to make the right decision, and it will not always be fair to everyone. But having the integrity to speak the truth and to act your conscience, that is vital in a servant leader. And the second is humility. The humility to know that you don't have all the answers and therefore it isn't your job to impose answers or even to suggest answers to your team. It's also about the humility to know that all of your decisions won't be right, but to make them anyway when they're called for, to stand by them for as long as they deserve defending, but to change your mind when the facts change or your awareness of the facts changed. Humility is about being prepared to say sorry, to say you're wrong, to make things right, and to do things differently. And along with humility, number 3 is self-awareness. Awareness of your strengths, awareness of your weaknesses, awareness of your motivations, your desires, what enables you to succeed, what gets in your way, so that you can become a better and more effective leader and professional every day. The fourth attitude is restraint. And it applies in 2 very distinct ways that are of course closely related, but the first one is the restraint to not use the authority and the power that you have when it's not needed, to let your team get on with their job. And the second is recognizing that you and your team will come under pressure sometimes, and that will cause emotions to rise. You may get upset, you may get angry, you may get scared. It's the restraint to rein back your emotions and to act calmly and compassionately. The fifth attitude is respect. Respect your team, respect your stakeholders, respect for the people around you. And a large part of that is building empathy with them, to reach out to the people, to get to know them. Because it's very easy to be disrespectful when you don't know a person, but once you get to know them, once you understand them and what's going on in their head, what's going on in their lives, then it becomes easier to build respect for that person. The sixth attitude is a communication attitude, the attitude that communication is a good thing, that you should share information as freely as you are able, and to craft a communication style which is easy and effective. And of course, all of the elements of communication are here. Persuasive communication, conflict handling, and coaching and supporting and guiding and difficult conversations. Next is trust. Cultivate an attitude of trusting your team. Now, some people find it very hard to trust others, but let it happen. Let them prove themselves. Let them delight you with their work. But you know what? Sometimes they will disappoint you. But don't let that erode your trust. Find ways to put in place risk management that allows you to carry on trusting your team. And a servant leader needs to be there to encourage and facilitate collaboration. Collaboration is vital in the success of any team. And as a servant leader, it's part of your job to help it along. But once it starts, let it become self-sustaining. Take a step back and don't get in the way. Number 9 is insightful understanding. Your job as a servant leader is not to know everything, to have all the answers, but it is to take your time to consider every situation in the round, take into account all of the aspects of that situation, and develop understanding. And you should have time to do this. This is a priority for you, and you should have time to do it because you've stepped back from an active day-to-day leadership style to a more serving style. So take time out to reflect, to listen, and to learn, and to develop insightful understanding of what's going on, so that you can give your team the knowledge, the information, the ideas that they need and they may not have time to generate for themselves. And finally, the last attitude that I'd highlight is the attitude of wanting to develop your people. And the jewel in your development toolbox is coaching. Take time to coach people around you. So servant leadership is all about an attitude that you're there to lead, but the way to lead is to serve. Your followers are there not to do what you ask them to do, but they're there to thrive and make things happen. And the best way they can do that is if you serve them, to give them the resources they need and to protect them from the distractions that will get in the way. But I truly, truly believe that the gold standard, the best style of leadership, is servant leadership. And if you haven't tried it, take it out for a spin and look at the results that you get. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our videos in the future. And in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.